Knowing how to choose and use paintbrushes and rollers and how to clean them properly will ensure your painting experience is a good one. In this episode, we're going to show you how to get the most out of your paintbrush and roller. But now the first thing to look out for is if your paint has been standing for a long period of time, it's going to settle and you need to give it a really good mix. You can make yourself your own little paddle or you can buy something. You can also get an attachment which connects to your drill and mixes it automatically. The next thing to look out for is the paintbrush. You can either use a small paintbrush or something larger. The smaller paintbrushes you're going to hold like a pencil, and the larger paintbrushes you're going to hold by the handle. It's important to remember to always give the bristles a good run through just to remove any dust, any loose bristles, any old paint, and give it a good clean. So that's basically it. Now you're actually going to use your brush. Now remember, a really good idea, especially if you're using PVA acrylic paints, is to actually dip the brush in some water, squeeze it out, and that way it allows the paint to adhere to the brush better and release onto the surface as you're painting. If you're using oil-based paints, then you're going to use mineral turpentine. Dip it in, give it a squeeze out, just remove the excess. You're basically just dampening the brush. Now we're going to dip it into our paint. You're not just going to dip it all the way down to the bottom. We're going to dip it to about a third of the way. And then how you normally would squeeze it off the excess off the edge of the tin or the pot, you're not going to do that. Rather just dab it on the side. You'll see I've dipped it about a third, and instead of brushing it off, you're just going to dab it on the side. Now your brush is loaded with the right amount of paint and you can get cracking. When painting with acrylic paint, always work from top to bottom and back up and down again. And then you're going to move away on a horizontal direction. When it's time to reload the brush before you dip it in, this is when you scrape it on the edge of the container. This just works at excess paint back down the brush, stops it going further up the handle. You can wipe it off, dip it in, load it up, and away you go. This is bound to happen that the bristles are actually going to come out of the brush and into your paintwork. How to get them off? The easiest way is actually just use the brush and flick it off in the opposite direction. There you go, there's another one. And then you just take a rag or an old piece of newspaper and just wipe them off and go back over those strokes again. When painting with oil-based enamel paints, always remember to paint around about 3 vertical strips with a gap in between a little bit smaller than the size of your paintbrush. You're then going to do horizontal stripes across to blend the paint into the gaps. Once you've done that, before reloading, you're then going to do vertical strips from bottom to top. And that way you're actually offloading the paint and spreading it around easily. When you finish painting a surface, clean your brush immediately. When cleaning your brush after using acrylic paint, it's best to try and get as much of the paint off the brush as possible. I'm going to just use the back of a scraper just to brush off as much of the paint and then wipe the excess on some old newspaper or some cardboard. Now basically you're just going to wash it out. We're going to use water because it's acrylic based paint with a little bit of soap to help it. I'm going to do it under a running tap and let the excess go down into a bucket. Work the bristles to get all the paint out from the center. Continue working this until you get clear water coming off the brush when you agitate the bristles. Now that you've got all the paint out, give it a really good shake to remove all the excess water and then hang it up to dry. A handy hint is to keep all your safety equipment on until you've done all the cleanup operation, that way protecting all your clothes. Slip a loose rubber band over the tip of the bristles to hold them together and to keep the brush in shape for future use. Alternatively, wind some old newspaper or paper around the damp brush a couple of times and leave it to dry. The newspaper keeps the bristles aligned so they don't distort while in storage. The last thing left to do now is to actually get rid of all this mess inside this bucket. Now remember, don't pour it down the drain. That's not the right thing to do. Rather pull it away, let it stand for a couple of days, and this water will actually start separating. The sediment will settle to the bottom and the clear water will come to the top. You can pour the clear water off and leave the sediment to dry in the bucket, and then you can dispose of it in the standard rubbish bin. With solvent-based enamel paints, it's exactly the same process for cleaning a brush. Wipe off the excess with a scraper, brush off on some cardboard or some old newspaper, but this time we're actually going to rinse it off with some Polycell brush cleaner. Now what this does is this actually separates all the paint from the bristles, and you end up using a lot less because then you can wash it with water straight afterwards. Put that in a jar, pour a little bit inside, and then give it a good work. Squeeze out the excess, and then we can wash this underwater. The nice thing about Polycell is you actually don't need to use much of it in compared to turpentine. What do we do with this? Well, pretty straightforward. Put the lid on, seal it up, leave it to stand for a couple of days, and what's going to happen is that's actually going to separate. The sediment is going to settle to the bottom and the clear Polycell is going to come up to the top. You're then going to pour that off back into your jar and reuse it at a later stage. The sediment left behind, let that dry out and then dispose of in a dustbin. Remember to always clean your roller first to remove any excess lint and dirt, and also to wash it to allow the paint to absorb better into the roller and to release onto the wall. Remember, use water for acrylic based paints and mineral turpentine for solvent based paints. And then just squeeze off the excess. Next, fill about 1/3 of the roller tray with paint. Do not overfill or it will spill. Dip the roller into the paint and then run it lightly on the ridged part of the tray. This spreads the paint evenly on the roller sleeve. When painting a wall with a roller, place the roller in the middle of a run or strip of wall about 1 meter wide, working up to the ceiling and then down towards the floor in a W shape. This will distribute the paint. Then without reloading, work horizontally across the area to fill it in. Do not stretch the paint out. When it starts to run out, reload the roller with paint and apply in a W pattern. Overlap strokes while paint is wet for a smoother finish. Finish each section with a light pressure rollover to even out any lines left by the roller. Line your paint tray with aluminium foil or cling wrap so you don't have to use water or solvent to clean it when you're finished. Just throw away the liner. When cleaning acrylic paint off a roller, use the back of the paddle to actually push off all the excess paint. You can get that drip down back into the tray. Once you've got most of it, you're going to rub that on the rib part just to remove any excess, and then get an old piece of newspaper, start painting that up just to remove as much as you possibly can. Now we've got most of the paint off, we can go straight under the tap into the bucket and rinse it off with water. Work the roller through your hands, twisting to get as much of that paint out as possible. You are going to use quite a bit of water here, you may need a second bucket. You can stop once no more paint is visible as we work it. Always remember, keep your goggles on and the gloves on when doing this activity. Squeeze out all the excess water, give it a good shake and then hang it up to dry. When it comes to cleaning enamel paint off a roller, this can be a little bit trickier. Again, just remove the excess paint with a paint stirrer. Run the roller over the rib part of the tray. And some newspaper as well. That way, just getting off most of the paint. Now we're going to use the Polycell brush cleaner, which is ideal at actually releasing all that paint from the roller, and then we're going to wash it off with water. So you're not actually using that much brush cleaner in comparison to turpentine. Pour it over the top and really work the bristles. Use a little bit more. Before we rinse this off with water, we're actually going to use all this dirty Polycell that we've got here, pour that into a container and store it for later. Put the lid on, we're going to leave that to settle, and a few days later it will have separated and we can pour the clean Polycell back into the jar. We can now rinse off the rest of the roller with normal water. There we go, once it's all clean, give it a good shake out, remove all the excess water and hang it up in such a way that the nap is not touching any of the sides so it doesn't get damaged. As we did with the acrylic paint wastewater, we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to let it settle for a couple of days, the clean water will rise to the top, the sediment will settle to the bottom. We're going to pour off the clean water and then we're going to let the sediment dry out in an old jar and then dispose of in a rubbish bin. Making sure your brushes and rollers are kept clean will keep them in good order for next time when you want to use them. Remember, if you have any queries or need any help, go down and see the guys at Builders. They'll be more than happy to help you out.